Welcome to the Hardcore MBA podcast with your host, Erlend, Bakke. Would you like to have a free copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Never Work Again? All you have to do is rate, review, and subscribe to Hardcore MBA podcast on iTunes and email us a screenshot of your review to Erlend at MrOutsource.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Hardcore MBA. Today, I have a cold, but I'm still here because I'm really excited about the interview today because I've actually been following Maren Kate here for quite a few years, ever since you were in Las Vegas and you started talking about virtual assistants, started talking about escaping the 9 to 5, which you blog about on escapingthe9to5.com. But in the meantime, since then, you've actually started a company that you grew to 450 people with the backing and help of Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos. That company was recently sold to startup.co. You are passionate about delegation, distributed workforces, and entrepreneurship, the same as me. And that's also why I started MrOutsource.com. And if you actually go to the website, it's actually it's a ripoff of the old Zirtual website. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And thank you for lending it to us. So where are you in the world right now?
I am in San Francisco, California.
Okay, one of my most favorite places in the whole wide world.
It is beautiful and has great winters, very mild.
Yeah. Are you like in central San Francisco or like the Bay Area or?
I'm in downtown San Francisco. I'm literally a few blocks from the AT&T ballpark.
Oh wow, fantastic! I used to work out of Rocket Space.
That was literally one of my first places too when I moved here was Rocket Space, the old one.
And I actually rented a room with a 92-year-old Norwegian lady in Berkeley Hills. And I paid something like $600 a month. And that included food and wine.
My God.
So that
is a deal.
That was in 2010, I believe. So that's a good deal.
That is an amazing deal.
So you basically got started on eBay when you were 19. What made you start your own business?
I read an article in the New York Times when I was in college about eBay and about someone that had posted like some random item from their household and it had like gone for some insane figure. And it just kind of made me think like, well, if they can do it, like I should probably check this out. Like, can't be that hard. And that's what got my interest. And from there, I just started looking around me and seeing kind of what I could sell. And I eventually landed on jewelry.
Okay. And what made you stop doing it?
I'd done it when I stopped doing it, I was 23. I'd done it for 4 years, and it was just very repetitive. I got kind of tired of it. It was a lot of physical work, sourcing the jewelry, taking photos, writing up stories, importing, stuff like that. And I just got to a point where I was kind of tired of it. I wanted to be around people my own age, do more just do something different. And I had started bartending at 21, so I just kind of jumped into that full time for about 6 months. And then I hit a point where at about month 6, I was like, I can make way more money online without like the physical kind of aspect of it. And so I started exploring different options that weren't exactly products like jewelry or stuff like that, and that's kind of how I learned more about different types of internet businesses.
So 7 years ago, you wrote a blog post October 16th. What do you say? 7 years ago, you read the 4 Hour Workweek. What happened when you read that book? And you read it in Italy as well. Good luck.
Yeah, I think it was literally like really close to when I stopped doing jewelry on eBay. I just was blown away by the fact that you can outsource and delegate a lot of your work without having to have a lot of money or be in a physical office. And from there, I just kind of started gobbling as much content as I could about everything that was mentioned in that book. So different internet businesses, internet marketing. I just looked up everything and read about it and followed the people that were kind of pros in the space. And the thing that really stuck out to me was delegation, because it was something that just, I guess, kind of naturally I've always been predisposed to. And I always thought when I was younger that it was laziness. But then I realized, and especially now I realize, that it's actually kind of a gift. So that was a huge turning point for me, because, I was 23, I didn't have a lot of money. I really wanted to, explore more and become a legit entrepreneur, which is what I thought. And I knew that I would need people around me to help me get to that point, because I'm not a web designer. I don't know how to code. There's far more things I don't know how to do than things I do know how to do. But I'm like decent at putting together the big idea for a business and putting together the systems and pulling together the team for it. I just didn't know it was possible to do that. Excuse me, I just sneezed.
I might
Sorry
sneeze.
again.
I might sneeze a little bit later myself.
Okay.
And I'm not holding my nose. This is my natural voice when I have a cold, if you were wondering.
Okay. Yeah, so it just kind of all clicked when I read that, and after doing research into a few of the different stuff he talks about, because he covers it in the book, but he doesn't dive really deep. Finding blogs and reading other books on the subject was just fascinating. And then I found an online group called Internet Business Mastery. That actually, they were the reason that I was listening to their podcast, and they were mentioned Tim Ferriss, and that was the reason I got the book. I learned a lot being a member there for, I think, a year or two, just about kind of how to start an internet business and everything from hosting to website domains, just things I didn't know, and it opened up a new world to me.
So when you had your eBay business, were you already delegating then?
When I had my eBay business, I was delegating a little bit, but it was more to people in the city I lived in. And I think I also had someone in Canada who was helping me as well. Sometimes it all meshes together.
Did you ever outsource to the Philippines?
I started outsourcing to the Philippines, I think, right after Italy.
Right. Okay, cool. So at some point you said, okay, I can't really do this in Vegas. I need to go to San Francisco, because that's where all these sort of tech companies are. That's where it's at. How did it feel when you kind of just made that decision and kind of left?
Well, actually, I was in Reno, Nevada. So I left Vegas when I was 18, and I moved to Reno, where I was going to school. And I dropped out my senior year because they had a requirement for English literature that you had to have 4 credits of a foreign language, and that just didn't make sense to me. So I was just like, screw it, I'm not going to spend another year trying to do this, and an English literature degree really isn't going to get me anywhere anyhow. So I dropped out, and then I was just living in Reno with my ex and my 2 cats, and doing my businesses. And yeah, there was just a moment where, again, I read an article in the New York Times about an incubator in San Francisco, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to put a application in, and if I get accepted, it's going to be the sign from the divine that I need to go to San Francisco and create. I was always on the path to like create a real business, quote unquote. But what I have noticed is, as the businesses that I've been a part of get larger, what constitutes a real business only gets bigger. So it's kind of just a faulty notion.
Yeah, and you certainly grew a big business from just being you and a business partner to 450 people. That must have been quite a big challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
And so how did you find your first business partner? And tell us about the early days.
So my 2 co-founders at Zirtual, came out and joined me about 6 months into the business. I was in San Francisco working out of Rocket Space, doing it by myself. And Colin Vine was a colleague of mine from Canada who I'd worked with for several years with Escaping the 9 to 5. And a few other projects. He read the blog. Somehow we got connected. And when I had additional work in some of my various little businesses, I would loop him in, and me and him would do the work together, like some social media marketing, some other stuff. I don't even remember. But we were always kind of collaborating and keeping in touch. And then Eric Jensen, who was our designer and front-end developer, who's now gone on from Zirtual to do a design department at Uber. He's just phenomenally good. He was good friends with my ex in Reno, and I knew him from bartending at his favorite bar. We were friends as well. And it just happened 6 months in. I was like, I can't really, do this alone anymore. And Eric had just left his agency job in Reno. Colin was kind of looking for something new. And I hit both of them up and was like, hey, I have a tiny studio in San Francisco, but if you guys want to come down and, crash on the floor for a few weeks and see what this startup scene is like, it's pretty cool. And they came down and they just never left. And they became co-founders, and Colin led the culture, community, and training aspect of the business, and Eric was our developer and designer.
And this was what year?
2000, end of 2011.
Okay.
Or late summer of 2011.
Okay. So the training aspect of it, how did that work? In Mr Outsource, what we do is we actually have a 3-hour free training. So it's we basically say, oh, you need work, you want work, then come to this free training, and then at the end of it, we actually sell them training. So they have to pay for a 7-day training, and then if they are really good, they then become part of our VIP virtual assistant list, and then we connect them with clients. That's how we do it on our end. I'm just curious how you guys did it.
We did it a little bit differently because a lot of our assistants were, for the last 2 years, were all employees. So they were trained after they were hired. And then back when they were independent contractors, they would still be brought on as an IC. And then they would go through, I think started as 1 week of training. It graduated to 2 weeks of training plus 2 weeks of on-the-job training.
Because
it was all done virtually. So there were a few different tools that we used to help them go through what we called Zirtual University, this virtual training and testing platform.
Okay. And how do you get really good people? How do you attract amazing people? Because Zirtual basically is a people business. And the better the people you have in your business, the better the business runs, the more people want to work for you, etc. How do you attract great people?
By having a very specific culture. So having a culture that stands for very specific values, and then people that also align with that culture will be attracted to it. So we had a culture that was very high EQ. We had a lot of people that were in theater, a lot of actors, a lot of people that really valued personal freedom and the ability to work from home. And we really played up that culture because we loved it and we all were part of it as well. And I think that's by far the way we get the best people is, by creating a very unique, very love it or leave it type of culture. You attract those people. You also turn off a lot of people, but that's what you want. You want the people that aren't fits to self-select out before it even begins.
Do you do any types of disc tests or any personality tests to kind of say, okay, this person is compliant, this person is,
We actually didn't. We were thinking about doing it later on, but with employees, there's actually some pretty strict regulations about using personality tests to affect any kind of hiring. So it wasn't that easy, actually.
So there's actually legislation that says you can't test people and base.
There's legislation that says you can test people, but it can't have any forbearing on your hiring practices, which pretty much means don't test people.
But surely, if you test people and you naturally find whether they're a fit based on that, it would be beneficial for both the employer and the employee. I mean, if an employee goes into a job and they're looking for somebody,
but at the same time, it can be seen as discrimination. Okay. Just like, it could be easy to say, well, surely if this coffee shop hires only Christians, then it would be good to ask people what their religion is first off.
In terms of having
but that's highly illegal and it's prejudicial.
Right. In terms of having virtual staff all over the US, what are the negative sides of that?
In retrospect, I would have done it instead of all over the U.S. I would have done it in maybe 3 to 5 specific hubs, and we were actually moving towards that, which was we just kind of hired people as they came anywhere in the 50 states, but that spread outness, it didn't allow them to have kind of an offline community amongst themselves. So what we were focusing on is having hubs of Las Vegas, hubs of Dallas-Fort Worth. I think another hub was in Georgia, and those were really to allow people to gather and meet offline. And also, if we ever wanted to do training in person, it made it a lot easier. Just logistically, obviously, it makes it tougher when people are spread over the place. It's totally doable. It's just, you have to make sure that it aligns with the business needs.
It's interesting. We actually only have people in a place called Davao City, where we have a co-working space, and the people that work for us full time, they also work from there. But we also have part-timers in the training, and so it's kind of like a hub environment.
Yep.
We used to hire people from all over the Philippines, but we found that it was difficult to maintain a strong relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. Thumbtack is a company that hires thousands of people in the Philippines, and they are completely virtual all over the Philippines. And they make it work very well. So I think it depends on the structure and kind of the type of work they're doing.
So you basically had your 2 co-founders. How many clients did you have at that point?
When they joined, it was very small. I don't remember the specifics, but it was pretty tiny.
Okay. And how did you grow? And at what point did you say, okay, now we need money?
We grew through word of mouth. We did a bunch of random, crazy things. Everything from me and some of the girls who worked in the office who are very first CAs, we brought on a few people in office just to test it in person. And we'd go down to the coffee shops. We would walk up to people on the street in San Francisco. We would try to talk to them. We'd go to bars and try to talk to people very, very grassroots, to getting little pieces of press, to building out a client referral system, which kind of really helped us grow.
So just hustling.
Yeah, pretty much just hustling. I
think we lost.
I couldn't write it down and give it to someone in a repeatable fashion. It's really one of those things. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think there's a little bit of a delay. I'm not sure why the UK hasn't been able to get proper internet yet. Surely it's meant to be a developed country, but they're. You still here?
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. So you grew the business, and then I mean Tony Hsieh, Sappos. How did you manage to land that?
It was just a random coincidence. One of his people, like lieutenants in his business, used Zirtual, told him about it, was like, you guys should meet at some point. I was in Vegas visiting my family and also looking at potential office space downtown because we did think like we wanted to have some of our corporate stuff in Las Vegas instead of just San Francisco. We met for lunch and we were thinking about raising money, and me and him kind of chatted, hit it off, and he was like, instead of raising from VCs, you should just raise money from me. Like, I'm an entrepreneur, I've done this before. And yeah, like, I mean, I can't even explain like the series of events. It was very, very random. But we ended up doing our Series A. Tony led it, and then a venture capital firm called Mayfield participated, and also the Vegas Tech Fund, which is a tech fund in downtown Vegas.
So was this something that you wanted to attract into your life? Like you wanted the ideal investor,
yeah, yep, that was definitely one of my affirmations was attract the best investors for the company at the time, and I think that Tony is definitely was one of them. So, yeah, no complaints there.
Because Sappos is built around the culture of the people. He wrote this book, Happiness, like delivering happiness. It was all about the culture and people, and Zirtual's the same.
Yep.
So it was a good fit. So he understood the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He understood the culture part of it, especially.
So, from that point, did you trust trust the process? Did you trust him that he had your best interest in mind, or did you have lots of lawyers and were you skeptical? And how was that?
With Tony, I trust him implicitly. We've actually gotten very close over the years, and are more friends than business associates by far. But at the same time, when you're running a business, you make sure that you have all the proper channels. He was not the only investor, and as we grew, there were a lot more. So we definitely had lawyers and all the stuff that you're supposed to have to be legally competent.
In terms of the business model where you kind of just buy hours, we've tried having this dream team model where basically you can have graphic design, web design, SEO, audio video transcription, a couple of other things. But I find people really, really struggle to delegate. I find people really, really have a big problem with understanding that if they just buy that time, then they can spend that time on something else. They don't really see the return. We're having some trouble with choosing exactly what to focus on, because we could say, oh, we're only going to do web design, or we're only going to do transcription. But with Zirtual, it's more like general tasks. Did you find?
I mean, it was administrative tasks. We were very, very strict about not doing stuff outside of what an executive assistant could do. So we did no web design, no audio, video editing. We were very. That's why we had a partner network.
Right.
I think the more you can focus, the better. I also think that people are. I think if you can get away from the selling hours and instead sell value, it's so much better, because people are just hardwired to wonder where their time went if they're paying for time, versus if you say, hey, this is $1,000 a month, this is the value you get from it, peace of mind, someone available every day to handle your stuff, yada yada. Versus if you say, hey, here are 50 hours a month, people will be like, oh, well, did I use 50 hours? It really is just positioning. We sold hours, but if I had to do it again, I would only sell value.
So how would you actually change that in on the page, on the website? Like how do you transition it to value?
I mean, I haven't thought a ton about it recently. I can only say how I do it myself in my consulting is, I have a rough hourly of like, if it breaks down, like if someone just wants to meet with me for an hour, I'll charge them like $250 USD. If somebody wants ongoing help, I will say, okay, this is like, we're going to set this price per month. And when I, work with early stage startups that are, pretty much using their own money, I'm a lot more like, it will be much more careful than like if you're a venture backed startup and you can actually afford it. Like it's almost like I kind of operate on like a pay what you can scale, like they do in health clinics. I mean, not as much now, so I don't get requests because I'm pretty slammed as it is. But what I do is I won't say like, all right, this is like, say I'm charging a few $1,000s a month for consulting. I won't say that equals X hours. I'll say, this is the price. This is the value that you, like, what value are you looking to get? And they'll say, we want to find our product market fit. All right. So if each month I get you closer to finding your product market fit, or we hit XYZ goals, then we count that as like, that was a win of a month. Like that was money well spent. Versus someone, if they took $4,000 divided by 250 and was like, all right, so that should be 16 hours. So you should be spending exactly 16 hours on the business. Whether I spend 1 hour or 100 hours really doesn't matter. All that matters are the results. And for some reason in our society and culture, and this is pretty much across the board, people really focus on the process, not the results. They focus on employers focus on people clocking in and clocking out. Employees often don't feel comfortable leaving the office in the middle of the day, even if they would be more productive working at a Starbucks. They don't want to, the optics aren't good, quote unquote. And I hate that word with a holy passion. But at the end of the day, all that matters, like if I have 100 employees, if they all work 1 hour a day and they do amazing at their job, I shouldn't care. But if I'm judging value on time and not on value, then I actually will. So like it's a complicated thing. Thinking it through it as a business owner is not easy. It's difficult. But if you can figure it out and crack the code in your own business, it sets you very much apart from the competition, and it also it's the highest order. It's the best way to go, because at the end of the day, results are what matter, and people nitpicking over time is just a distraction.
I guess sales teams are often focused on results rather than time spent.
Exactly. And all teams should be focused on it. It's literally the only thing that matters. I always tell anyone I'm doing advising or consulting with that they have to read the 80-20 principle, which is a fantastic book. And the book is kind of like, comes from a scientific point of view of why that matters. Like 20% of what you do in a month is going to affect 80% of the results. So really that is the only time that was a valuable spend. But people lose track of that. And especially when you're selling hours, people tend to nitpick and tend to focus on like what doesn't matter versus, wow, I was freed up. Like I got more time. I was able to be more effective. I got to, take 3 days off instead of only 2 for the weekend. And on that third day, I had a breakthrough that will massively affect the trajectory of my business.
My girlfriend is currently working for Lego, and they have quite a flexible environment. So sometimes she works in the evening, and sometimes she sleeps in, and then vice versa. And seems to be a company that's really figured out results based working. Lego?
Of course.
Everybody knows Lego. It's crazy. It's like 10 million fans on Facebook or more. Anyway, so. That's really good advice. Focus on value, focus on results. So you're growing this business. How did that affect you sort of emotionally, spiritually? physically, because it takes a lot of energy to grow in that kind of space. I've never done it in my own business. I mean, we've grown and I felt those pressures, but to grow at the pace that you guys were growing must have been quite a challenge.
If you'd asked me during the time, I would have said it doesn't affect me and I'm fine. But in retrospect, in the early days, I drank more than I should, probably just because that was the way of coping. And then I actually got to a point where I decided to go and see a therapist because I was just there was a lot of personal things I was dealing with and I wasn't dealing with them well. And working with her for a few years got on a much healthier path. But at the end of the day, I mean, the way it's affected me is I went to the doctor in August and I actually just got my results back this week, and they said that I have stage 3 adrenal fatigue.
Oh.
One of the worst cases he's seen, which pretty much means that all of my adrenal glands and all of my ability to deal with stress is just shot. I have zero what's it called? Zero reserves for stressful situations. So now when I deal with a stressful situation, I get tired. And I thought I had a food allergy or something else was wrong with me. But even small amount of stresses, my body starts just shutting down because I have no more reserves left. And that's due to long-term chronic exposure to stress. So I think that's probably how it's affected me. Thankfully, it's reversible with hormones and vitamins and some other stuff. But at the same time, I think it's something that happens to a lot of people. It's definitely, I'm not the only person that this has happened to. Happens to a lot of founders. I just think that it's not very talked about. I think that investors and advisors on early stage companies have a moral responsibility to say, hey, make sure you're taking care of your health. Make sure that you're, sleeping, you're eating, you're exercising, you're, taking care of your spiritual or mental side. And I think very few people do that. I think people in the Valley and in the world in general focus on the small things like money and success and write-ups in a newspaper. But one of the things that I've come to realize, and I'd say especially over this last year, especially in the last 3 months, is just that how little that stuff matters in the long haul, how little it matters if you're not healthy, how little it matters if you're miserable. So I think that it's one of those things that if I had to do it over again, if I was dealing with the exact same kind of company, the exact same growth trajectory starting now, I have a much better toolbox for dealing with it. I would not get sucked in the way I did before. I would not work my ragged. I would listen to my own advice about focusing on input. And I just think that when you're a first-time entrepreneur and you're on the roller coaster ride that is a startup, you lose perspectives because you don't. It's very important for people to talk about that more instead of kind of pushing it under the carpet.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I actually had a panic attack because of all the stress around business, and that's when I kind of learned how to do meditation and yoga and all these other habits that help with that. And without exercise and all those things, I would keep on having panic attacks. I think I have changed a lot about the things about how I do business, but at some point you just get so excited, you get so wound up, you're so into it that it's hard to hold back. Maybe you can relate to that as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So basically, the entrepreneurial pursuit has had a physical manifestation in your body. With the adrenal glands, but luckily you figured it out and you can now do something about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of success habits do you have now? What kind of things do you do on a daily basis that you kind of find helps you today?
Now I have a very religious morning ritual, which I normally don't, outside of on occasion, take any kind of meetings or calls before 11 a.m. I leave my mornings open to, wake up in a relaxing way, to meditate, to eat my breakfast, to read, to journal, to just kind of get myself in a good headspace before starting the day, versus how I used to for the majority of the last 5 years, which was jump out of bed, start work. It's actually far less effective. And so that's kind of the big part is my morning ritual. And then, like you said, meditation. And also I'm a huge believer in affirmation. So I carry a notebook with me everywhere. I update my affirmations on a monthly basis. And that's a large part of my life as well.
Does it feel good to be out of Zirtual now? It's moved on to startup.co. Is that a good feeling?
I mean, it feels good now that I have some time to, like, I'm very grateful now that I am having time to figure this stuff out. I wouldn't say it feels good because a lot went to it.
So how does it feel to be out of Zirtual?
I mean, it feels good to have some time to rest and recuperate, and also just to, get myself back into a healthy place. I would say, like, obviously, when you work on building something for 5 years, it never feels good when you're not involved with it anymore. But I kind of just take things as they come. So I don't know if, like, good or bad even tie in. It just kind of is.
So what's next for you now? What's your next big dream?
I'm doing some consulting. I'm helping some other startups and both advising and consulting with them. And I'm probably going to start another company at the beginning of the year. I'm just kind of waiting for the end of this year to give myself, the time to decompress. And then in January, I have an idea that I'm going to be launching.
Cool. And if we want to hear more about you, we just go to escapingthe9to5.com. Is that the best place to connect with you?
I'm starting to get better about writing on it, and I'm also creating an email list where I'm sure, as you know, like any entrepreneur, especially someone who, like, I'm just very creative, interesting, smart people. There's always 1,000 business ideas, maybe not 1,000, but there's probably like at least a few a week that I stumble upon, hear about, think about, that I will never execute on, that I'll never make into a company, but they're decent. Like, either they're like an idea that could be a small revenue stream, or they're an idea that if you threw a lot of time and energy, it could be something big. And I've always written them down in my notebooks and filed them away for later. But I realized that, there's only 1% I'm going to be able to focus on. So one of the ways I'm trying to give back and also just kind of document is creating an email list for Escaping the 9 to 5, where, as these ideas and businesses come by me, I'm passing them on to see if anyone wants to execute on them, if anyone wants to take them and run with them as their own. So I think that'll be kind of a fun experiment.
Fantastic. So all the best of luck. I do have one last question. Why do you love pigeons?
Because well, I call them God's littlest hustlers. They're scrappy. I think I like them because they're scrappy. I like them because nobody else seems to appreciate them. I've always said that if pigeons looked like parrots, like, people would love them. But because they're gray, because they're sometimes covered in dirt and garbage, like, people just, I don't know why. I mean, people say, why do I like pigeons? I don't understand why people hate pigeons. Like, they're birds. They, can live in anywhere. Like, anywhere in the world I've been to, I've always seen pigeons. And there's something just very cool about them. They're kind of like the underdog of the bird community. And I don't know, I guess I've always felt a kinship with them in some weird way. Mike Tyson really likes pigeons too. So I'm in good company.
He lives in Vegas, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And he goes to the Fancy Pigeon Show that's held in, I think, Brighton, England, every year. I'm planning on going next year.
Okay, Brighton. Yeah, that's about 2 hours from London, maybe 1.5
Yep.
on train. Yeah.
Yep, they have the world's largest pigeon show.
Fantastic. Okay, well, on that note, check out escapingthe9to5.com. You can also follow Maren Kate on Twitter at Maren Kate. And that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed the show, please share it or write a review. Thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you. Mr. Outsource is a recruitment company matching busy entrepreneurs with Filipino virtual assistants, so you can have the time to focus on what's important.